when you see how you can uplift them or open the door for them or let them see their passion or that they really do have abilities, that they really are a person of value, that has value, then that's very uplifting to me, more than anything.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Just let go. Michele Sullivan is on the show this week. She recently retired as the president of the Caterpillar Foundation and the director of corporate social innovation at Caterpillar. Now, Caterpillar is a $46 billion entity, and you probably know of Caterpillar by looking around and seeing the construction, big equipment that helps take care of our roads and bridges. Well, Michele was responsible for the foundation, the philanthropic area and component of Caterpillar. And she has a perspective that is extremely unique because she was born with dwarfism. She is a little person. And in this episode, Michele and I talk through her journey and how she's navigated being different. And she talks about how we all have our differences. You know, we all have our challenges. Some you can see and some you can't. And what that means to her. Michele has a book coming out soon called Looking Up. And one of my favorite sentences in the book reads like this. She says, while it can be intimidating, even today, this permanent physical posture has taught me that the most powerful relational posture I can have with others is to look up to them rather than down on them. So she believes that we can learn to look up to each other, and that will elevate the look of the world. You will hear and just feel how positive Michele is and her outlook. We talk a lot about how she remains positive and what happens when she isn't, what happens when she has a dark day, a dark moment, the tools that she uses, and what she does to specifically get through those times. When Michele was born, the doctor said to her parents, take her home and treat her like everybody else. And this really hit me. I was able to read her manuscript early and do it in prep for this conversation. And I think about being in the hospital with my son Lincoln for several months and when he was born, and how that piece of advice may have been the thing that helped set the trajectory of Michele's life and being such a positive influence on this world. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poo-Pourri, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poo-Pourri have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopourri.com and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poopery in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now, episode 28. Poopery is also available at Target. Michele, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's very exciting.
Yes, indeed it is. And we'll hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? And we'll talk through that day, that hour, that minute, that season, and kind of better understand how you navigated going from idea to action.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have several, but one of the biggest ones that impacted my career at Caterpillar, I was about 23 years into my career, and I had an untraditional path. I'd been in marketing and operations and working on the dealer side and parts, etc. But I'd always went down to the first floor of our headquarters and talked to the foundation people. I've always had a passion for social impact, and then the other passion, of course, is Caterpillar, as my dad and sister both work at Cat. We're a Caterpillar family. So, to bring those two together was really my dream job, but it rarely changed. People kept it for 15 years plus usually. And so in about 2008, somebody had gotten the job. I didn't know it was open. But they only kept it about 3 years. So I was in Decatur, Illinois, with a global product manager having a meeting, and I got an email and it said, Michele, it happened. This is, in the summer of 2011. And I went, oh, darn, now what happened? Because anytime your boss says what happened, or if you have an opportunity, you kind of laugh and roll your eyes like, okay, yeah. So I waited till break, and then I called her and I said, what's up? And she said, well, it happened. I said, well, what happened? And she goes, your dream job came open. And I said, you're kidding. Only after 3 years. And she said, yeah. And she goes, do you want to put in for it? So I really thought about it because the job I had was a very global job, and I got to work with all the product managers around the world. So it was very exciting and an area that I wanted to get a lot of experience in. And I went home and I talked to my family because of my situation with my disability. I always have to travel with someone, and I knew that job would require a lot of travel, and I would have to lean on other people to help me. So it was really a family decision, and I really loved the job I was in. And after talking to my family, it was one of those, why not now? Now's my chance. And with 23 years, I knew that was probably my last job at Caterpillar, and what a way to go out, bringing my two passions together. So I told my boss the next day, yeah, put me in, I'm all in, why not? And actually, those were the words I said. I said, why not? But it's also one of the most anticipated jobs that people want. So I knew there would be a lot of people putting in. So I certainly knew that it was not a shoo-in, even if to get an interview would be a good thing. And so my boss had written a note to the hiring manager, and at the end of the day, I was one of three. And I had thought so much about that job, what I would do to use our brand to bring awareness, etc., that I pretty much had it laid out before the job even came open what I would do. So the interview was not hard for me in the sense that I had a pretty good idea of what I thought we could do. And then, lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I was at another product manager's office at a facility, and the hiring boss was calling me, but I couldn't take the call. So my heart was racing because it was either going to be a really good day or a bit of a disappointment. So I waited, and after the meeting, I went into the ladies' room because I knew I'd probably cry either way. So I went in and I called him, and I got the job. And it was just so exciting. And that was the start of a lot of transition for me and the foundation, and for people in poverty, as we really redid our strategy to focus on that. And it all started when my boss, emailed me, and I talked to her, and she said, do you want to do it? And, with the help of others, I said, why not? And it was interesting because other people had called because that was not my career path. I was on another path at work. And if for some reason this wasn't my last job, to be out of the business for 7 or 5 years, however long it was, it would be really hard to get back on that side. So it was a risk for me as well. But it was absolutely a risk that I had no regrets, no matter what happened.
It's interesting because you know, the why not and the why not me, you know, the why not you kind of comes into play in those situations. And here you were able to, I have a saying and it goes, if, you know, where passion, purpose, and skill collide, bliss resides. And for you, it sounds like that intersection was down the hallway versus doing a complete 180 with your, you know, company and leaving and possibly, you know, having a complete change in opposite direction. It's so, I think, encouraging for people to hear that you were able to make a change, a shift, but still within the same organization, right? So it wasn't that you were having to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. Your experience and your longevity with the company was still applied, and you're able to capitalize on that mileage that you had put in. So as people are listening and they're thinking, why not now change and do something I really want to do versus maybe what I'm doing that I don't love? Well, it might be down the hallway, right? It may be closer than you think. It doesn't have to be a 180 necessarily.
Right. It can be a shift in perspective even. And the current job I have, several of my jobs, I totally changed them as I got into them, and they were totally different by the time I got done. And I love doing that. I like the unknown. I like change. And of course, you always take a calculated risk. And, you know, when you think about, and I had thought about that job for so long, and then it happened. I couldn't believe it.
Well, and let's talk about, I mean, just in general, Michele, and I'm fortunate to have gotten a glimpse at your manuscript early. And so I want to dive into your new book that will be out soon and just your life, really. It's, you know, you have so many amazing takeaways, but given the season that I'm in, and most of the audience and the listeners here are familiar with Lincoln, when I opened up and started reading, you know, some of the first words in your manuscript, it really hit home with me. And I'd love for you to share, if you'd be willing to, kind of what happened when you were born, what the doctors said to your parents.
Sure. So my mom and dad had my older brother, Brett, and then they had, shortly after that, they had another baby boy, and he was premature at about 7 months, and he only lived about a day. And then, so a total of about 2.5 years later, they had me. And most little people, 90% of little people are born to average-sized parents. So it's really just one of those things that happens. And so I was born with a bit of a club foot, so they knew something was a little off. So they took an x-ray, and then they noticed my skeletal dysplasia, my dwarfism. And, you know, this was 50 plus years ago, which, you know, you didn't see people with a disability around really at all, let alone know, you know, that there's 200 types of dwarfism that they've since, you know, identified. So the first day is when they came in and told my parents that I was a little person. And Dr. Warwick, who's the one that delivered me, said to my mom and dad, you know, you take her home and treat her like everybody else. And I'd like to think that my parents would have done that anyway because they're very resilient from their upbringing. Mm-hmm. But, you know, even today, but more so back then, whatever the doctors did, you really listened. And I still think my parents would have bucked the trend had he said, you know, you go do something else with her. So that was the first day. And so you couldn't tell, though, that I really was any different. as I started to grow, and then 2 years later, they had my sister. So there's a total of 3 of us. And coincidentally, I was the largest baby that was born. And my mom had gained so much weight, they thought she was having twins with me. And I always joke that I came out as a half, being 4 feet tall. So it was kind of coincidental. But, as I started to grow, then the differences started to show in height. As my younger sister, by age 4, we were the same size, if not, she was starting to get bigger than me. And so my growth was about, as I got older, I quit growing at 10. So, of course, everybody else hasn't even really hit their growth spurts yet. So that's really how it happened. He said, take her home and treat her like everybody else. And, as I got older, the orthopedic problems started. And that's when they really started to go around the country to find someone that could help. And that's really how things started. And coincidentally, when I was in my teens, Dr. Warwick, of course, had retired. But he tracked my mom and dad down, found our phone number, and this was before the internet and everything. And his daughter had given birth to a baby with dwarfism. And he wanted to know what we had found out in terms of medical care. So, of course, we told him what we had found, and there was Dr. Kopitz at Johns Hopkins, that was his specialty, is skeletal dysplasia. So it was interesting, doctors, you don't think of them sometimes as reaching out like that. So it was really quite amazing that he had tracked us down, and then, he has it in his family, which, it's a positive thing. It brings a totally different perspective to your world.
Yeah, I mean, it's in reading what you share in your book and then going on to kind of see some of the more meta takeaways that apply to all of us, really. And one of I just want to read this short passage, but you said, while it can be intimidating even today, this permanent physical posture taught me that the most powerful relational posture I can have with others is to look up to them rather than down on them. And that's really conceptually what, at the heart, your book is about. And the other thing that really resonated was you didn't realize that there was really any physical difference for quite a while, right? Which I think is...
I had no idea.
Yeah, and I'm so... I feel just joyful that was your experience. I don't know if you consider it a gift, but I think that's kind of incredible. And, you go on to kind of teach and share that we all go through many challenges, some of which you can see and some of which you can't.
Yeah, like what you went through with Lincoln. You'd have no idea if they saw you out that you were going through that.
Right. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately there was, I think, a meme on Instagram, and it showed this timeline, and it was like this long timeline, and it said, this is a person's life. And then it showed a tiny increment, and it said, and this is what you know about them. And it just reminds me of how you really don't know the full picture and what someone's going through. And we can't see those things sometimes, and oftentimes, really.
Right. And some of mine, with being little, of course, you can see a significant piece of what I deal with every day. Mm-hmm. But there's so much more that, I have to worry about every day or deal with, just like everybody else. And some days you have more than others. Some days, a saying I like is, the car is heavy today, meaning there's a lot of load in the car. So, it's really important, if someone, a loved one, a friend, or a colleague seems a little down or short or, distracted, sometimes you have to give them space and give them the benefit of the doubt that there's something going on, and just let them know that you're there if you need them.
Absolutely. And just your demeanor and disposition seems to be so positive, Michele. what are some of the things that you find yourself doing, maybe habits or tools that you use to keep it's always an inside job, it seems, right? It's always comes down to us, and that's the stuff you can't see. But how do you maintain such a positive outlook?
I've always been a positive person. At work, we had to do the Strength Finders 34, and my top 5 strengths, the first one was positivity, coincidentally. And so, I've always liked funny things. I go to funny movies. Everybody else has autographs of different types of stars and everything. When I was young, I had gotten, Lucille Ball's autograph and other funny people. And so I always read and I love to laugh. That's the number one thing. Mm-hmm. And then how I start my day, I have a book by where I do my hair and makeup in my bathroom. And it has different Bible verses depending on what you need that day, whether you need reassurance or you have a tough conversation or you need a little extra love that day. And so I start my day by reading one of those, depending on the type of day that I'm going to have. Particularly when I worked every day, you always look at your calendar before you go to work. Mm-hmm. And some days are more challenging than others. And then the other thing is, to be honest, I surround myself by people who look at the world in a positive way, especially individuals, and who like to make an impact as well. And then I also like to be around people who we can help impact, because when you see how you can uplift them or open the door for them or let them see their passion or that they really do have abilities, that they really are a person of value, that has value, then that's very uplifting to me, more than anything. And so those are the type of people that I like to help, that I like to see and work with other people who help them. We all bring different gifts to having a social impact on people. And so also talking about my message, if I can do this, then you can do this too. I mean, we all have something to give, and that's important. So the other thing is, I started going to Johns Hopkins at 13, and that's a research hospital. So there were people there from all over the world with unspeakable diseases and different things that they were there as a last resort. And the only thing I was there for was to have hip surgery, which, is not life-threatening. And so I would meet these people, I had roommates, etc., who had things that I never knew could happen to the body. And so it really, at 13, I thought, are you kidding me? I don't have anything to complain about when you see what other people are going through. And then when I got in, especially into the foundation, and went to, Africa and other places, and saw how people really lived in extreme poverty. Again, it was uplifting because I knew that we were making an impact, and others, so many people give to others, that we really can make an impact on these people. And then I go home, to running water and everything else. Mm-hmm. So at 13, that probably had one of the most profound impacts on me, without a question.
Oh, what an impressionable age to have that experience and be kind of the wave of perspective that you must have been going through. And I definitely want to talk about your work that you've done. I mean, in terms of, just being the president of the Caterpillar Foundation, and Caterpillar, just for those listening, it's a $46 billion company. Just huge. And what amount of responsibility yet opportunity to be able to guide the efforts of impact on your end. So I'm going to just put a bookmark in that for a second, because I know we share some passions for some specific causes. But going back really quick to your outlook, and I have 2 questions. One is, What do you do when you find yourself in a down moment or a down day or just even a down season? Like, what are your go-to pick-me-up tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends. I like Prosecco. I like to drink Prosecco. No, just I certainly don't turn to that. But seriously, sometimes you just have to work through it, meaning you're going to have a day like that. Or if my hip's really killing me and I can't quite go out and do the couple things I had planned on for the day, it does get frustrating, believe me. I certainly have my moments. And when it comes down to it, I do reflect and I do think about the people I mentioned who have a lot more challenges. And at the end of the day, even when you go to bed that night, the dawn is coming. And I love that African proverb. No matter how dark the day, the dawn will come. And so, I get up a lot and I say, today's a new day. Yesterday was not a good day, and you work through it. And again, I do read. I'll read a verse, or I'll watch. I watch a lot of funny TV. I have things taped because for me, that's what lifts me up. And then, of course, I have I call it the village around me, my friends, my family, who you absolutely can call and get it off your chest. Mm-hmm. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. You never know. You never have to wonder what I'm feeling. I'm very emotional. So, if I'm frustrated, it comes out. And, you have to be honest with yourself. And I reach out to people who understand. Sometimes I specifically reach out to some of my little people friends if it's something related to that. Mm-hmm. Where, not often when I'm out in public, if someone says something or they follow me or something happens, but once in a blue moon, it really gets to you. And you go home, you call up one of your friends who can absolutely relate with empathy. Empathy is you've actually can relate to it personally. And so I lean on that a lot. And one of the greatest things my parents got me into was Little People of America at 12 because, 99.9% of my life is in the real world, the big world. But it's really nice to be around, once a year or whatever, people, who I truly can look at eye to eye, who, I've been friends with for 30 years and can truly understand. And so when you think about the people around you, your village, what really gets to you in terms of listening to music or videos or TV, I always turn to the humor. And then also, the type of reading that I do helps me a lot. And truthfully, I meditate because I'm a type A personality and I really have to, settle down sometimes because I get really excited or, if I'm incredibly frustrated, you have to get settled down as well. So I have a bunch of tools in my toolbox depending on the situation.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I think knowing which tool to go to seems to be something you're pretty good at because you're very self-aware too. It's like, okay, I need to watch a funny TV show right now, or I need to go read, meditate.
Or it's amazing. Something you like, go, whatever it is you like, go and do it. And we all have, activities that we really enjoy. I have a little dog and I take her out a lot and it just, it's funny. I talk to my dog.
Sure. I get that.
Yeah. And so it's all good. And, sometimes none of that works. But again, no matter how dark the day, the dawn will come.
Mm. And I've heard you talk a lot, and just even your TED Talk, your humor, your lighthearted, just fun comes through. And you've mentioned your gift of gab quite a bit, right? And so can you talk a little bit about that? Have you always had it? How it's been an asset for you?
Yes, my mom and dad said I came out talking, and I'm the complete opposite of what my brother was. My brother was incredibly quiet. So for me, to be honest, I think I'm born with it, but also I can tell in the first 10 to 15 seconds when I meet somebody One, if they're surprised by my size, and two, if they're going to see past it for who I am. And so I believe I learned at a very early age that I had to talk first in order to get people to see past what my size is. And so whether it's a joke or honestly talking about the weather, whatever I come up with, and I don't remember a specific time, but I do remember very young that people would just like stare at me. Because as I got older, you could tell, 6, 7, 8, that obviously I was a little bit different physically, but I didn't understand it. And so I could tell that there was always a hesitation and always people stared. And they still do that today. But, as a child, you don't understand it. Even adults would stare. So my mom specifically always would tell me, go up and talk to people. You make the first move. And that's a whole chapter in my book. And so for me, that's really where it came from, is it was my job to go do it and to figure it out. And a friend also told me that whenever you meet somebody, you don't have to meet them in person, but you see them, you always leave them either a little better off or a little worse off. And what that means is you have an impact on everybody. Even if you just say hi or give a nod, you left that person a little better than before you met them. So I take that to heart, and I talk to everybody. Now, sometimes they don't want to talk, and I get it, and I'll, you get the hint when someone's not open to you. And I get that, and you just turn away and just say, hey, nice to meet you, and, you move about your day. But it does take a lot of courage, especially when someone isn't the typical person that you might talk to, or you're a little nervous. It takes a lot of courage to always go up and, talk to people. But you'll be so surprised when you meet people and talk to people. You see the value in them. It expands your perspective. It's all good.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Quick favor before we dive in. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment, and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. It's really neat to hear some of your stories too, of how you're entering into a situation. Let's just say sometimes when you travel, it's, there are things that you have to navigate, and it seems like you lead with the gift of gab. It's a strategy. Not only is it a positive impact and the intentions are good, but it's also extremely strategic, right?
It is. Sometimes it's my survival tool.
Yeah.
Because if I know I'm going to need somebody's help to get my luggage down or get the door open at the hotel, if you start talking to the doorman as you're coming in the door, and after you check in, and you walk over and you say, hey, nice to see you again. Can you help me get into my room? And also it's a respect type of move as well. You have to acknowledge people. And there are days when I obviously don't get acknowledged. And so, and that happens to other people for different reasons. And there are people who have it a lot more than I ever will. So I don't want you to think that it happens every single day, all the time to me, because that's not the case. But to other people, they get it a lot. And I think that we really have to adjust our perspective on how we evaluate people and really take the elevated view that every person you meet has value and is worth speaking to.
So good. So good. So let's talk about some of your work with Charity Water. And that's, been a just a passion of mine, and I have a spot in my heart for sure for the work that's being done by Scott Harrison and his team. Scott has been on the podcast as well. What an amazing journey and story he has. And, I had the opportunity to go to Ethiopia. It was probably 2012, and just be exposed to a whole nother world and way of living. And you've done a lot of work with Charity Water and just clean water and that initiative. What were some of the takeaways that you might have from being exposed to just a completely different living situation?
Yes, first of all, Scott and Charity Water, they are doing amazing work and bringing water, which really is the basis, of our existence, that and electricity. And you can't survive without water. So water was one of the pillars that the Caterpillar Foundation invested in heavily. And so when I went to Rwanda to see the work and the projects that we were investing in, we went up a mountain to get to the folks. They live at the tops of the mountains in Rwanda. And of course, the water's at the bottom. And so we visited a village that was going to get water by the end of the year, and they accessed to water at the top of the mountain, so they didn't have to go all the way down. And of course, usually the people that carry the water all the way up are young girls. Mm-hmm. They carry the water instead of going to school. And as we're driving up the mountain on roads that it made off-roading seem simple. I mean, I thought the truck was going to fall over on multiple occasions trying to get up. And yet these girls were passing or carrying these water jugs full of water, and they're 6, 7, 8 years old. So that I knew about it. I'd seen pictures, but when you drive by it, it's absolutely gut-wrenching to see. Mm-hmm. And then when you get up there and see how the folks live without access to the water, without the water in these jugs, first of all, the impact it has on everybody that carries it, especially the girls, and they don't get an education. And then you have the health aspect. And then you meet the folks in the little villages, and, lack of water has every type of implication in your life that you can think of. And as you talk to them, they don't necessarily know how it will really change their life when they get access, because they've never had it. Mm-hmm. So as you talk with those folks, and then you spend the other half of the day on a different mountain with people who have had it for 6, 8 months through one of our projects, you see that I talked to a woman, and she has what she calls a little restaurant. And it was a little room, and it had a couple chairs and a little table. And she could offer some food and some water because they could pump the water out. And so I said, "What's the biggest difference for you in your life?" And she teared up, and she said, "Michele," and of course, some of it was in English and then some of it was translated. But she said, "My children are going to school." And so she goes, "That is what I needed. Because of the money I get from my little restaurant is going to sending my children to school." And she goes, "They will be better off than I will be." And then she took me around back, and she had a little hectare of land where she was growing crops. And of course, the water allowed them to have a better yield because, when you have rain or water, the plants grow better. And so she would offer some of that food at her little restaurant too. So for her and most, the impact on the family is profound. And it's also the start of breaking the cycle of poverty, generational poverty. And so it broke my day up in half. Those who don't have water, what got me excited was I knew what would change for them in about 6 months when they got access to water. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe they really had any idea until it actually happens to you. And when that well or that pipeline comes in where you can actually get the water, I was excited for them, but nonetheless, not the whole area did not have access. So I knew going down that day that there would still be people carrying water up and spend all day carrying it. So it absolutely has an impact on me. It still does to this day. And one of the things that Scott's group really does well to really get people to understand what these people go through in terms of carrying water, not living without water, because it's extremely difficult to really appreciate it unless you've lived through it. But they do a water walk where they fill up the yellow cans of water and make people carry them, just one. And it weighs, 30, 40 pounds? Mm-hmm. And here are these young girls carrying two of them. Mm-hmm. And when you go to lift one, let alone two, and you're a grown person, and you start to carry it 100, 150 feet, and it's called the water walk, you really start to somewhat empathize with what these people are going through just to go get it, let alone live without it. So they have really they've really created a mechanism that you can appreciate the hardship that they have to go through every day.
Absolutely. And sometimes they don't have, oftentimes they don't have shoes and the water isn't clean yet, depending on whether or not the well has come or they're going to a source of just any water, but actually it's contaminated and they just need something, and that then creates a whole nother host of problems. But I too we would visit villages that had clean water and they'd gotten the wells or the pipeline, and then villages that hadn't yet that would be getting it soon. And the physical difference and the feeling and just the energy and the difference was incredible. And I think one of the key takeaways, and it's something in listening to you, I think now you've surrounded yourself intentionally and in the beginning when you were 13, having these bouts of perspective. It's really powerful to have that. One of the things I left Ethiopia realizing was how important it is to understand what enough looks like, because they had nothing but the water. When they finally got just a well, that was it. They were rich. They were absolutely rich. And understanding what enough looks like will create a pretty rich life. And I found myself doing that with Lincoln in the NICU for 3 months. We had a fairly easy ride, and that might sound odd to some people, but we saw a lot of other things, and it was like, okay, a good day is pretty clear what that involves, and that's enough. That's enough. That's all we need today.
But it's perspective, isn't it? It goes back to looking up. It's you sometimes physically have to look up to change your perspective. And the other piece for the water, and you saw this, the health aspects. I mean, people die not having water, or they have contaminated water. Mm-hmm. They're getting water where the animals are, and we saw that. Yep. And so for these people to be healthier, it was so uplifting, and I really try to focus on that part. Is they are Charity Water, and the people who support them and the other water organizations are making such a difference in people's lives, and you can give people water for $30. Yeah. It's amazing what you can do to make an impact. An impact doesn't have to be $1 million. Sometimes it's just you give $30, or you go down to an organization in your town and you help people learn to read. Mm-hmm. Or you go to a grade school and read to kids who don't get that at home. And, you have to look up and think about what impact can I make? And it all starts with your perspective. Mm-hmm. And believe me, some days we look down, right? We all do. And you have to figure out what your triggers are to get you to start looking up again. And how do I make that person a little bit better for meeting them? And because they made me better by talking to me as well.
Yeah, amazing. It's amazing that this, some of these problems are actually solvable, and we're seeing huge dents being put into and seeing such progress. Michele, what's one lesson you find yourself learning over and over?
One lesson for me is how every day new things are coming up to really break, whether it's poverty or innovation in health. The world is moving so fast that it excites me, and that I really try to think about how do I contribute and keep up, and where do I want to spend my time. And it changes throughout your life. Different things become more of a passion or important to you as you go through life. And so for me, I think about that a lot. And I like learning new things, trying new things. And because of all the work and connections with the partners through the foundation, I really get to help others who want to make a difference and help them evaluate different organizations that is of interest to them, and which ones, provide the best return on a dollar and making, the biggest impact. So for me, I really like change and innovation and keep it going. And then I'm definitely a collaborator. It's funny, people go, oh, you work at Caterpillar, you must be Republican. And then others, oh, you work for a foundation, you must be a Democrat. And I'm like, I'm neither. I'm a collaborator. Part of our whole issue in the United States is these two parties not agreeing on much. And I'm the opposite. I love bringing people together and let's figure this thing out, whatever it is, like water. And Scott with Charity Water is very open to that, along with water.org and others who are working in this space and other spaces. Everybody collectively, we really are making a difference. Mm-hmm. You can see it. And figure out what it is you want to do and get others to look up to that.
Yeah. It's interesting, Michele, because when I first learned about you, and we have a mutual friend that introduced us, I thought, wow, Caterpillar, what a conservative, this is my assumption. My assumption would be what a conservative corporation, female leadership. Here you are in this very powerful role. And I thought, gosh, I want to talk to her about that. But then when I started learning more about you and your story and just what your message is, it's funny how it just fell off to the side. And I'm definitely someone who believes in empowering women and have worked in that corporate world and in a lot of, male-dominated industries. They all are, but especially look at yours. And it's funny because I just now realized we haven't even talked about that at all. But you know what? I think seeing is believing, and just the fact that you are, have held that position and that level of responsibility is kind of enough. I don't even know what more we would need to talk about. So it's just a pretty cool full circle, like, oh, wow, we didn't even talk about that. But you know what? I don't know that we need to. But is there anything you would say, about that?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's funny, isn't it? One of the greatest compliments I ever got, a friend years ago said, we were doing something, and she said, Michele, I forget that you're little. I go, well, thank you.
Yes.
Because, I'm Michele first, and I just happen, to have dwarfism. And I'm forever grateful to Caterpillar and all the jobs that I had and opportunities and experiences, and for them to select me in such a role that was, very visible and important. I felt such a profound responsibility, because the company funds the foundation. Caterpillar funds the foundation. And, that's on the backs of the employees and the customers and dealers and everybody that makes all the sales possible. And so I wanted to make sure that we invested it in the best possible way and let them know what their work has allowed, our partners in the not-for-profit space to do and help the people who aren't as fortunate as us. So, Caterpillar will forever be a part of my life and still is. But, we all play a role individually as well. And Caterpillar is very good about, making sure that we give back to the community. It's actually one of the values that we have as a corporation. There was a value, and it states, we will be community people that give back, and we have that as a responsibility. At the end of the day, in our hearts, I think that most of us know that the real measure of any person has little to do with what can be gauged by a lens, a ruler, a scale, etc. And to see a person's real worth and to help him or her realize it, we have to grow beyond reliance on visual cues like height, weight, skin color, shirt labels, etc. We all are much deeper than that. And we all benefit from other people and organizations. And so the more impact that we can make to each other and look up to each other in a very positive way, especially in today's world, that who you sit by makes national news because you may not agree on something.
Yeah.
I think it's better that we all don't agree on everything, because that stifles so many things like innovation, etc. I like meeting people who don't think like I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes challenging our own assumptions and antiquated beliefs, like let's just say, your situation in working for what would be assumed to be a pretty conservative company, and maybe not very progressive in different areas, but actually that's not true. And so challenging, wait, is this true? Is that even true? Or is this just an old belief? And getting out of our own way in that respect, I think is important, because it's refreshing to see. So I can't thank you enough for your time, Michele, and what you've done and continue to do. I have so much respect and look forward to this next chapter for you too, and following your journey. Absolutely. And where can people find you? What's the best way to stay connected?
Yeah, so my website is MicheleLSullivan.com, and I am Michele with one L. So it's MiCheleL, the letter L, Sullivan.com. And all my stuff is on there, and where you can get the book, and it's on pre-sale on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and it's called Looking Up. And I hope that people feel inspired and motivated about how to look at each other. And, we all are making a difference in the world, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And I appreciate all that you do, Amy, to bring awareness to a lot of things that we all need, and it's helping everybody.
Thank you. And likewise, thank you so much for your time. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time, and until then, why not now?